Welcome, everyone, to episode 2 of Computer Vision Decoded, where we sit down with Jared Heinly, Chief Scientist at EveryPoint, to discuss topics in today's quickly evolving world of computer vision. Today's episode, we're going to discuss Jared's recent trip to CVPR. And in this episode, Jared's going to give us a quick overview of the conference and a few key findings that he found at the conference. So, Jared, first off, welcome to the show. And can you just tell us what CVPR is? Because I'm assuming half of the audience might not have ever heard this conference.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jonathan. Happy to be here. So CVPR. So it stands for it's a conference on computer vision and pattern recognition. So that's where you get the CVPR acronym from. And so CVPR, is the top computer vision conference that's held each year in the United States. And so it moves around different parts of the U.S., but it's typically held during the summer months here in the U.S. It's the top computer vision conference. There's both academics there, there's industry there, but it's a big place where all the latest and greatest computer vision research is being presented.
All right. And so this year it was in New Orleans. My biggest question is, did you have alligator?
Yes, I did. I had alligator two ways. I had it the one day. It was like an appetizer, like fried alligator bites. It's really tender, really juicy. I was kind of surprised. And then I also had it another evening. It was some like alligator sausage.
Nice.
Tasted pretty good. So
yeah. Well, if you've never been to that part of the country or Florida, you have to try fried alligator. They're actually, most people don't realize, more of a nuisance than they are anything in those states in the country. So anyways, let's jump back into computer vision, because I know that's what everyone's here for. Okay, so at the show, there's papers, there's oral presentations, there's all sorts of different information. And if you watch Jared, you have very robust Twitter feed from this show. So if you want to go back and watch this, just follow Jared. He's at Jared Heinly. But I noticed that a lot of the papers, a lot of the presentations were very academic or scientific. If I'm a non-scientist, me, myself, not an engineer or a scientist, would it be worth me going to this conference and checking it out? Or do you feel like this is really geared towards, the computer vision and pattern recognition research community, people outside of that academia and scientific study? Would they get something out of this?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. You definitely could get something out of it. I mean, first and foremost, CVPR, it's a place to present academic work, and so PhD students, researchers, professors, throughout the year, or we'll have been working on papers, working on new methods within the field of computer vision, and then those are written up in papers, which are then presented at the conference, either through short oral presentations or as posters that are displayed that then people can walk around and ask questions about and see. So primarily, it's a way to discuss and present academic work. Some of these works are easy to see. Like, you could walk up and there's a very easy method. It's, oh, hey, we took this problem, here's some key insight, here's this new solution. And so there's opportunities there to sort of learn and see new things. Very understandable. Some of the works are maybe a bit more intimidating. I walk up and I'm like, I have no idea what this math means, what this problem is. I've never heard of this before. And so it takes a bit of understanding to kind of ask questions and see, well, why is this useful? What's novel here? What was new? And so parts of that are a little more difficult, but it is an opportunity to get a sense of what the computer vision community at large is working on. There's thousands of posters that were presented during the conference, and so there's just a lot of information there. It's also interesting too if there is a big industry presence. There's an industry expo that also happens in parallel. That's primarily sort of a recruiting event. Companies are there to attract new talent. Sometimes they're also selling. If they're like a camera company might try to sell a new camera or depth device, other kinds of sensors that they want people to be buying and using as part of their work or their research. but that it's an opportunity to get sort of the taste of, hey, here's what academics are working on, and here's the kinds of talent that industry is looking for, or things that industry is tackling.
All right. So it sounds like the expo is more geared for someone like me specifically. If you want to make connections in the industry, other companies may be doing things with computer vision, but not necessarily dive into those academic papers. Pretty sure if I looked at some of these papers, I would look at the pretty pictures, maybe ask a couple questions, and they would wonder why this guy's here. It's not really for me. And so that's good. It's good to know, because we see a lot of these interesting conferences, and you always wonder, is it worth the time and money to go to these conferences? And so it sounds like if you want to go and learn about what's the newest in computer vision, it's more geared for the scientific community and less geared for, a project manager who just happens to have computer vision in their project. So that's helpful.
Yeah.
And so you said you said before to me, you've gone to this show for several years. This is, last year it wasn't in person, but you've been attending for, at least a half decade, longer?
Longer, yeah. My first was 2011. I was starting my PhD, and so 2011 was the first CVPR I attended. And I didn't attend every year since then, but at least this has got to have been my 6th, 7th, or 8th time there. Well, no, I guess it hasn't been in person the past 2 years. But yeah, I've been there many times and have seen it grown over the years. Just kind of coming back, CVPR. When I attended back in 2011, there were 1,500, 1,600 attendees, which at the time felt like a big conference. Now, so the last time it was held in person was 2019. There were over 9,000 people in person attendance, which is huge. Now this year, with travel restrictions and COVID, there was lower attendance. There were 5,600 people in person, but it's a big conference.
It just shows a testament to the industry as a whole and how it's growing and becoming a part of so many products in everyone's lives.
Yeah.
I don't think everyone understands how computer vision is touching their lives. Almost everyone on this planet, in some way or another, in some way, right in a product they're using or invisibly behind some product. So yeah, it's really exciting to see this whole entire industry grow. So as then you've seen this industry grow, and of course things keep changing. What was in 2011 probably a hot topic might be no longer a hot topic. Maybe we've mastered it. What are some research trends or areas of research that have emerged in the last year or two that you've seen at this show that perhaps you weren't seeing so much of a couple of years ago because either it didn't exist or because that's where the market, of course, industry money pushes research in certain directions as well. So what did you see as emerging trends there?
Yeah, I guess, the biggest thing I saw was the prevalence of NERFs, so neural radiance fields. There was a blog post I think that Frank Deller posted. So there was over 50 NERF papers there at the conference, which was just impressive. Every corner you turned is, here's another adaptation, another way to sort of improve NERFs. So 3D cases for people who aren't familiar with NERFs, it's a 3D representation of the world that's helps you can take photos as input. It sort of learns this volumetric representation that then you can use to render really, really nice images from vantage points that you hadn't captured. So if I took a bunch of images, 10 images of an object, I can now render sort of an infinite number of views of that object from different angles. So there's a lot of works focused around that, which that's really taken off in recent years. Sort of coupled with it, I'd say, okay, that is sort of emerging. Another just big presence, which I think has always been there, just this year I happened to sort of notice it more, was the sort of intersection between computer vision and understanding humans. And I'll say understanding humans in a 3D sense. So like, hey, from a video, can I recover the 3D pose of a person? So where are their arms? Where are their legs? Where's their head? How are their fingers? There's even a work on, can I reconstruct a person's tongue in their mouth? That was sort of geared toward, AR, VR. We're trying to create virtual avatars and really recover the complex geometry of a human and be able to create that, sort of lifelike replica. So a lot of works dealing with, sort of digitizing humans and understanding how do humans interact with spaces. There was there's a lot of work around sort of egocentric video. So it's, like first person view, so a camera mounted to your head or camera mounted to you that's watching what you're doing and trying to learn from that sort of vantage point. So that's sort of, human understanding was also going to continue to be a big trend. But yeah, just in general, a lot of works dealing with the 3D side of computer vision, which I was excited about. I'm sort of biased toward 3D, and so a lot of works dealing with 3D rendering, 3D reconstruction, and just marrying machine learning with 3D techniques. Talking about trends, I'd say a few years ago, a big trend was saying, hey, we've got this powerful tool, deep learning, machine learning. Let's use it to solve anything that we can. It's like, hey, we don't need geometry. The machine learning model can learn it. We can learn the geometry of a lens. We can learn the geometry of the camera. Let's just do end-to-end learning, which is still important and still being worked on. But where I'm seeing now a lot of advancements happen is saying, well, hey, we can use machine learning as a tool to solve these tasks. But if we also add in our understanding of physics, understanding from the computer graphics literature from decades ago, let's take in this understanding, combine it with machine learning in an efficient, intelligent way, and then it makes the results so much better. So that for me was really exciting. Looking at how 3D continues to be very relevant, and useful in a lot of these works.
Yeah, you've mentioned that in the past to me several times that computer vision and machine learning are merging as far as a discipline of technology that you need to learn as a computer vision scientist. You no longer tend to just know 3D reconstruction, or that machine learning component is definitely becoming something that you at least need to know at a core understanding. Maybe not be an expert in it in itself, but it is something that is playing in most people's technology stack when they're doing computer vision processes. I find that very interesting. I'm going to jump back into nerfs. If anyone knows me, they know I've become Mr. Nerf because I've jumped into these, and I found out that you can actually play with them at a very tangible level, and you don't need Nvidia's $20,000, whatever, $10,000 GPU for science research. You can actually do it on a fairly relatively new RTX 3080, or even some of the older GPUs work fine for getting away with it. So I'm seeing a lot of implementations. I looked through a lot of those papers, and I noticed that they all kind of have their different focuses. Some are just to visualize the world in a better way. Some are different alternate ways to take, let's say, camera shake and reduce that camera shake down to nothing, especially when you have extreme camera shake. How can you get a smooth trajectory path in that camera and make it look like you have a still shot, or removing objects, things like that. But then I also noticed Nvidia announced they're doing 3D modeling in the way that you would expect a photogrammetry package to have. So we're starting to see this in different sections of use. And so I get a lot of people keep asking me, really, why are people even using nerfs? Because we can do all this with photogrammetry, or they just don't see the point of it. Can you help the non-scientific community? Because I think that's who struggles. As a scientist, people say, of course this makes sense that we're diving into this research, and of course it's not in an iPhone or Samsung Galaxy Note or one of the newest devices, because it's not there yet. But we're only two and a half years in. How do you see this technology playing out in maybe in either an everyday product, or in some sort of fashion that is not just this academic paper showing, look how we took out a kid on a bike from the scene as he drove through it?
Yeah. So a nerf is a representation of the world. It's a way to digitize and store information about reality. So just kind of take a step back. So it's similar to, if I think about, okay, how can I model the room that I'm in? I could have a CAD model which is going to represent, here are the vertices, here are like the walls, the planes, sort of high level, geometric properties of this room. That's one way to digitize reality. Does that CAD model, maybe that CAD model is just the lines and the points, and so there is no color information. So then we say, okay, well, it'd be really nice to have color. So let's take that CAD model, instead convert it to a textured mesh. So we've taken all those polygons, we've turned them into triangles, and so now we've got this triangle mesh that then we have texture coordinates associated with. Okay, now we've got color and geometry. Well, what about reflections? Or, whoa, is this shiny surface or a rough surface? Okay, so now we start adding material properties to that textured mesh. But then what about fog? If I want to model, hey, there's a fire and there's smoke or there's fog, a triangle mesh can't represent smoke or fog because that mesh is a specific surface. It's like it's empty space and here's my triangle and then there's more empty space. You need some other way to represent fog or other effects. And so you can keep trying to switch to different implementations or different representations. And so that's where NERF is. NERF is just one style of representation to digitize reality. And what's nice is it can model complex interactions. And so it's able to mimic reflections and as you look at an object from different angles, you're going to get different colors. And so it's able to understand and represent that the appearance of an object changes based on the direction that you look at it. Think of a reflection in a mirror. The way I move my head and look at a mirror from different angles, I'm going to see different things. And so a NERF is able to capture that. A NERF is also, so it's represents sort of this a volumetric grid. And so it's able to capture effects like density or fog, saying that, okay, as I'm looking through this space, there's a particular density, and so I'm able to represent volumetric effects inside of a NERF. So there's pros and cons to a NERF. So to me, it's akin to, I've got a point cloud, I've got a mesh, I've got a CAD model, I've got a NERF. Each of them have sort of pros and cons in what they're able to represent, as well as how easy they are to manipulate. And so that's where I see right now, with NERFs being rather new, we're saying, hey, okay, we've proposed this representation. Now how can we use it? And so that's what a lot of this research is. It's saying, okay, well, hey, how can I use it to represent really large scenes? That's a field of research. How can I use it to get more accurate color, or more efficient? How can I compute a NERF more quickly? How can I manipulate a NERF? If I want to go in and manually edit a NERF to say, oh, I want to inject a sphere here, or move this, or warp it, or recolor it, how can I do that? And so it's just how there's been a lot of work dealing with rendering and manipulation of CAD models or meshes. There's a lot of work happening now about the rendering, manipulation, and creation of NERFs.
That's interesting. That really helps break that down for normal people, or people like me, I would say. I would also like to add it to really bring the analogy down, and this might be the wrong analogy, but I like to point out the fact that when cars came on the scene and over 100 years ago, they were slow. I mean, a horse was way better mode of transportation. And I'm sure there was a lot of people who said, this is just these loud, noisy machines that break down. They spew all kinds of, smoke in the air. These are just a fad, and now look, I mean, do we all take horses to work? No. So not to say that a NERF will replace some current technology, but it might just become another really great way to get, you said, a 3D representation of a scene, an object. And so that's why I have been keeping up with it, because you don't want to wake up one day and realize we're in the back of the technology stack because we dismiss this new technology, and lo and behold, NERFs have matured to that point where it's more efficient or better at producing some sort of 3D representation of a scene that you were trying to do in a different way that just took more time, perhaps more compute power. We've already seen the time and compute power coming way down in this. I'm also hearing from other people who are working on the visualization. So right now you make a nerf, you train, and that training times come way down, but it still takes a lot of compute power to then trace light through a scene and visualize it. So I noticed that there's probably some research you even saw there. How can we visualize this better? How can we render it on a computer that isn't high end? So I definitely seen that progress and that move forward, and I look forward to kind of keeping up with that with you as well, as we all kind of learn what's the newest and latest and greatest. So all right, so I guess I'm getting near the end of kind of questions I had about this conference. It's grown really. It's gotten much larger. You pointed out that there's NERFs, there's a machine learning being applied to make 3D reconstruction just faster, more robust. And also, it's a great event for people who want to go recruit. So I'm guessing if you're trying to build a computer vision team, you guys are not easy to hire. It's not like, not like this, thousands and thousands of you being graduated each year from a bunch of different universities. So that's a good reason to go alone if you're trying to recruit, make connections in the industry. But on top of all of that, if you were to go next year and you are a non-scientist, would you just recommend they go to the expo? Do you still feel like they maybe get something out of see those papers? Maybe go. I'm thinking for me as a non-computer vision person, and the whole point of this show is to kind of decode computer vision. Mm-hmm. Would it be worth it for me to, let's say, attend with you or attend with your computer vision team, and they could probably be your liaison to this world of computer vision and kind of them decode what you're seeing here? Does that be a good strategy, perhaps, if you're an executive at a company, you want to learn more about what's going on, trends?
No, I think that's a good recommendation. If you've got a computer vision team, go with them. Use them as your liaison. But I also, and I give this advice to any student or person if they're first time at CVPR, try to give this advice, and I'd say don't be afraid to ask questions. The computer vision field is really large, and so no one is an expert in the entire breadth of the field. And so I would say, when you're there, take advantage of the poster session. The poster sessions are my absolute favorite part of CVPR because that's the time when you get to interact with the authors of those works. And so people love talking about what they've accomplished, what they've done. And so I'd say I try to model this. I try to encourage other people to do it. But, take advantage of the poster session. Walk up to a poster. If you see something interesting in the title, see something interesting on the poster itself, some interesting graphic. Even if you don't, if you have no idea what's going on, just kind of say, hey, I'm new to this field. Can you just explain to me, in 30 seconds, what's sort of the high level idea, or what were the key takeaways or insights? And the authors, can then give you those insights, because a lot of times with these works, yes, there may have been a lot of formulas on the poster, or the method that took a lot of engineering to pull off, but there really is, 1, 2, or 3 sort of like key insights that the author discovered and it was able to use to enable this breakthrough in what they're publishing. And a lot of times those results, those key insights are very understandable. And so just going and asking questions during that poster time is to me the most valuable. I will also call out, usually during these conferences like this time, CVPR, the first 2 days were the tutorials and workshops, and then it was 4 days of the main conference, and that's where the oral presentations and posters were. But take advantage of those tutorials. So the purpose of the tutorial during those first 2 days when there's workshops and tutorials happening is to teach people new concepts. And so there typically are tutorials around machine learning or 3D reconstruction, sort of whatever is relevant at the time. And so that's a great forum to attend and learn more about it. So for instance, like this year, there was a tutorial on NERFs, which really walked through, here is the basics of the basics. Just define the terminology. What is a radiance field? How did we get here? And then starts building on top of that, saying, okay, well, with this basic knowledge, we can add it on. And sort of like, a compressed mini lecture that walks you through the topic and tries to bring you up to speed so that you can better approach and understand the work that's happening. Yeah, so there's a lot of opportunities just to learn, ask questions, and
how often do you have a chance to stand face to face with the lead researcher on a on a concept or at the paper sessions. That's what I've noticed is you see these specific people. I mean, I would call them computer vision science celebrities in some cases, where they are the foremost researcher perhaps in this specific domain of computer vision, and they're presenting a new paper, and there's no other way you're going to have a chance to ask them a question. I mean, maybe if you're in academia, you might, but most of the time they're heads down doing research, and you can't just ask them questions about that paper. I also notice as you read through a lot of these papers, I've gotten better at reading them and realizing they're all structured the same way. There's definitely a formula or format they have to follow, and this one thing that people always tend to skip over are the assumptions, and I don't know if assumptions are risks, or there's always some shortcomings. So people say, "Oh, this is amazing with Nerf," right? And then there'll be some assumptions, and there'll be some like shortcomings they pull out. Like for example, they say this took 30 hours using 4 very expensive GPUs for 10 seconds of output video. So yeah, it's great, but they're also saying, we're assuming you have that hardware and that time to wait for this output, or they're assuming the imagery you have is perfect. And that's something I want to talk to. I'm going to allude to the next episode of Computer Vision Decoded, just talking a little bit about the challenges of computer vision in the wild. And I know you have a lot of background on that. And so people don't realize when you see these really great models of, let's say, a shoe. Everyone likes to see shoes and rocks. But a lot of times those are put on a pedestal with a white background or on a turntable, and everything's perfect, and it's not in the wild. Or, there's a lot of things going on to get those captures just right. You're doing something for an archaeological preservation, and you can control a lot of the environment. But you're trying to put a lot of this in practice. For example, AV, autonomous vehicles, everything's wild. You're not driving on a racetrack that everything's always the same. Even the light changes as you're driving dynamically. So I like to point that out. In these papers, they're assuming a lot of things. Always look for that. And, you can ask those questions. You can ask those hard questions. And they're excited because they get to talk about what they've been working on for perhaps years on this paper. So anyways, with that, any last remarks you want to add on CVPR? So just give you that last chance.
Oh, I'm excited. For computer vision in general. Of course, the field keeps growing. It's really active. And just my own bias, I love, taking computer vision and applying it to 3D problems. And that's where I see, 3D computer vision is alive and well and is thriving, just in the ways that it's being applied across the board. And so I love just seeing all the breadth of problems that people are tackling. Using 3D computer vision, using really practical insights, and applying them to new problems to solve things that had never been solved before. So,
great. Well, thanks for breaking down the CVPR conference. I'm excited to watch you with your Twitter feed next year. It's your Super Bowl event on Twitter. And again, I'm going to throw this out there. It's at Jared Heinly, just like you see on the screen for watching this on YouTube. It's JaredHeinly for the people listening on the podcast. You can follow him on Twitter. That's where he's most active. And he does a great job at taking these papers and just distilling them in obviously only a few sentences, because that's all you have on Twitter. So you can go back and watch pretty much not all of the papers, because there was hundreds, thousands of papers, but you can get some great ones. At least if you like what Jared's saying here, it's a good way to see what he's interested in and learn a little bit about what he saw at the show. So again, Jared, thanks again, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone at the next episode. We'll do this every 2 weeks, and again, next episode will be computer vision in the wild. All right, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Jared.
Thanks.